On the 15th of July, a group of soldiers with suspected links to the Fethullah Gulen terrorist organization attempted to overthrow the government of Turkey. Their attempt failed when people took to the streets to defend their democracy. However, a state of emergency is now in place. Many are asking what next for this country. We talked to Ibrahim Kalin, Chief Foreign Policy Advisor to President Erdogan, as well as his spokesman. You're watching TRT World, and this is One on One. Ibrahim Kalin, thank you very much indeed for talking to TRT World. Now, President Erdogan has been saying for quite some time that there is this parallel state structure that's trying to undermine democracy in Turkey. You've been writing extensively on the security threats and other issues. So, despite that, why did we witness this bloody coup attempt? Was there some sort of an intelligence failure?
This group has been in existence in Turkey for some time, after especially December 17, 25th operation, as they call it. It became clear that they were a clear national security threat. And since then, we've taken a number of measures to identify these people and get rid of them from the state structures and institutions. In fact, there was a process underway to deal with this problem. But of course, this coup attempt is the latest action by this Gulenist group within the army. It was carried out by a small group of people within the Turkish army. It doesn't represent the whole of the Turkish army, obviously, but it was deadly, and it turned into a bloody coup, obviously, as we have seen on the streets. It shows the extent to which they can be so brutal. We have seen scenes that we've never seen in this country before. Our own soldiers pointing guns at our own people, unarmed people, civilian people on the streets. And we lost 242 people as a result of that. More than 1,500 people have been injured. Now, of course, this is a major problem. But what began as a dark night on July 15th turned into a bright day, actually, the next day, when the coup was thwarted. Now, of course, we are taking all the measures, legal measures, to make sure that such things do not happen again. To do that, obviously, we will have to go after these people within the army, within the judiciary, within the security forces, wherever they are. That's an absolute necessity for our own national security and for the security of this country, as well as to protect democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. In regards to this coup attempt, obviously a number of measures have been taken early, but thanks to the remarkable bravery of our own people, they stopped this coup, and I think they gave really a very dignified message to the world that they are committed to their democracy, freedom, and the rule of law, no matter who the enemy is.
Now, the response from the public was phenomenal, and as you point out there, perhaps many democracies wouldn't have anticipated that. Was the government expecting such a response from the public, especially when the president had called on them to take to the streets?
Well, when that happened, obviously we're trying to understand the extent of the coup attempt. It became clear within a short period of time that they had mobilized the armed forces in Ankara and Istanbul primarily, and 2-3 locations there. And immediately when it became clear that there was this attempt underway, the president get on the cameras and TVs and call on the people to take to the streets to protect democracy. Thank God it became really a legendary story. But I have to be honest with you, I mean, no one will have expected something of this sort of action, that they will be so crazy, they will be so bloody, they will be so murderous in their actions, and there was a sense of shock, obviously, but there was also a sense of joy and triumph at the end when this whole thing came to an end.
And the response from the public has been phenomenal. Despite a passage of so many days, people are still on the streets. Do you feel that that's perhaps due to the government policies or personal attachment to the president? Why are we witnessing such a reaction from the public?
First of all, it's the people's commitment to freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. In Turkey, we have experienced military coups before in 1960, 72, 1980, and some other things in between. But for the first time, a coup was stopped by the people themselves. So On the one hand, they are celebrating their victory on the streets. On the other hand, of course, they want to make sure that these things do not happen again. So they are giving a very powerful message to the people that no matter what happens, they will be on the streets to protect their rights, their country, their unity. And of course, the president has made a call on the people to stay on the streets to continue this message, not only to coup plotters, but also to the rest of the world. But if you look at the mixture of the people on the streets, there are people from all walks of life, from all different political parties, from different political angles and ideological backgrounds. What we have seen right after the coup is really remarkable scene of unity and solidarity, regardless of political differences. As part of that, the president called the opposition leaders and thanked them for their clear stance against the coup. And this is reflected in the streets also. So you have people from all different political parties, those who vote for party X, Y, Z, etc. They're all united, in their stance. But obviously, there is also an element of the leadership of President Erdogan, in dealing with this, because the critical moment, really, on that fateful night, was the president's call on the people to take to the streets. It took us some time to get that message across. There were some technical issues that we had to deal with because they had invaded, in fact, your own institution here, the TRT. They were going after the satellite companies to cut all electronic communications and satellite communications that night. But we were able to overcome that. So obviously his call was a very critical turning point in the counter-coup movement.
Now, we also see that while on the one hand the general public is onto the streets supporting the government, and also now that there has been this state of emergency, the opposition parties are also supporting that. However, we've been getting some statements from the international community, for example, calling on Turkey to observe the principle of proportionality, to ensure that the rule of law is observed and so forth. Do you feel the response that has been coming from the international community and some of the criticism is justified?
First of all, the state of emergency has been declared as a result of the coup attempt that was thwarted. And that is in line with the Turkish constitution. Article 120 and 121, in fact, allows this, gives this power to the government, and the government took it to the parliament. That was passed today, not only with the votes of the ruling party, but also the other opposition party. So it is within the constitution. What is going to be done now will be within the principles of the rule of law. Nothing has been done so far outside the rule of law, and nothing will be done outside the rule of law. But your viewers around the world need to understand the context in which this is happening. We just stopped a military coup, a coup staged and carried out by this Gulenist terrorist elements within the Turkish army, with support from people, their own members, their militants within the judiciary, within the other state institutions. So now, of course, there will be legal action against those who participated in the coup, who planned the coup, who staged the coup, but also those who collaborated, helped them from outside, and who also were going to be, as it is clear now in some of their documents that were obtained, helped them from outside after the coup. So we were going after these people. So I see some of the criticism, coming from the international community, that how come you have such a large number of people in such short period of time? Well, the fight against this Gulenist structure within the state institutions has been underway for some time. In fact, there was already a process going on, identifying these people. Some of these army generals who participated in the coup attempt, for example, were going to be either dismissed or not promoted in the next military high council meeting in August. So maybe they thought that this was their last chance, to do something to stop this. But the Gulenists, had this idea from the very beginning. Now, if you look at some of their statements, they claim that they have nothing to do with this. It's really, laughable, to hear them, say these things, because if you ask them, even their movement doesn't exist. They don't own any schools. They claim they don't own any TV or media outlets. If you ask them, they don't own any banks. If you ask them, they don't have any companies or nothing. So how come that this whole empire of banks and institutions and schools and companies, etc., has been operated by these people? So it's clear that they are behind this. and their words are not credible at all, not to be taken seriously at all. In regards to the claim that some people made this claim also, that this was a fake coup, so that Erdogan, will have more grab of power. It's like the very same people who accuse us of coming up with conspiracy theories are now producing this stuff as serious analysis. And I'm looking at this like, I can't believe that they're making these statements in the mainstream Western media. This is not any different than claiming that the 9/11 attacks were orchestrated by the United States, or the recent Paris attacks and Nice attacks were orchestrated by the French government. You don't take this stuff seriously. But unfortunately, when it comes to Turkey, double standards emerges immediately, and these nonsensical conspiracy theories are presented in such a way that in one way or another, unfortunately, end up justifying the coup. And one has to be very careful here that, we just went through a military coup. We stopped that coup in the name of democracy, rule of law, and freedom. So we have to understand this. So all the actions that are being taken right now within the framework of the state of emergency, in fact, are designed to protect freedom, democracy, and rule of law. There will not be any impact on people's daily lives. There will not be any impact on freedom to travel, freedom to assembly, freedom of expression, or economic activities. None of that. People in their daily lives will not be affected by this, just like as it happened in France. After the Paris attack, the French government also declared state of emergency, as far as I know, for 3 months first, and then they extended it. Now, just recently, 2 days ago, they extended it for another 6 months after the Nice attack. And that's a justifiable, legitimate action that was taken by the French government, and no one will criticize them. To the contrary, they emphasized the sense of normalcy in the country, and you see this in people's daily lives. So it's not any different here. People's daily lives will continue. Only those who are criminals, who are implicated in this coup attempt, should worry about.
Now, Turkey has submitted a dossier to the United States seeking the extradition of Fethullah Gulen. What are the expectations of Turkey now? And there are some suggestions coming from some politicians that the United States may try to use this as a bargaining chip in order to perhaps put pressure on Turkey as opposed to going on legal merit. What are your expectations?
There is a legal process that needs to be completed for his extradition to Turkey. We've been raising this issue for some time, but now after the July 15 coup attempt, a file is being formed right now. And the first batch, in fact, has been already sent to the American Justice Ministry through our foreign ministry, and there will be more as we gather more evidence that all that will be collected and presented to the U.S. authorities. Of course, our expectation and the initial reaction that we hear from the U.S. authorities is that they will take it very seriously. They will look into it with serious consideration. And once that legal process is completed, our expectation, of course, is his extradition. According to the legal experts, in fact, there is more than sufficient ground for his extradition. And we are hoping that that will be the result at the end of this process.
Now, there is also talk about restructuring the military. What exactly does that mean? What's going to be happening?
Well, this Gulenist group has infiltrated the army, and now, of course, the first thing is to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So it will have to start from the level of military schools, through ranking process, through their training, and all of that. And let me also underline one fact here, that there is a clear distinction that we have to keep in mind between this small group of Gulenists who try to stage this coup and the rest of the Turkish army. That army is our own army, and the army generals who went through this terrible process are acutely aware of the danger they faced. So now, of course, they're going to do their part. The government, will do its part. The president will oversee the whole process as commander-in-chief of the army as well as of the nation. And I believe we will be able to get rid of this menace from within the Turkish army. Of course, there will be other security measures that will be taken, again, to ensure that such atrocities do not happen again.
I've been talking to the general public at funerals, also at the Kızılay Square and other places, and one of the things which is quite common is that there is this huge demand for capital punishment. And I've sort of rhetorically asked many people that if they realize that if they bring in capital punishment in Turkey, that would affect their prospects of joining the European Union. And one of the responses I've been getting is that people have been saying that if joining the European Union would mean that Turkey would have to compromise on its security and dignity, then they could do without it. Do you feel there's this growing sentiment in Turkey? People perhaps feel that they've had enough of European Union and the EU perhaps ignoring them for their identity?
Well, we've been trying to enter the European Union for a long, long time. This never happened with any other member country. And since 2005, we are a negotiating candidate for full candidacy in the European Union. But unfortunately, the process has been so slow. For one reason or another, the process has not moved forward. Now, of course, after this coup attempt, people outside Turkey need to understand why the emotions are so high here and how people feel about this, because they died on the streets. Ordinary citizens died on the streets, and they were killed by their own people. Now, from a point of view of a sense of justice, it's only natural, for these people who lived through this to ask for capital punishment. And the president said that if that's the demand of the people, of course it's up to the parliament to pass that law, he will ratify it when or if it is presented to him. Now there is obviously a very strong demand for this in the country at the moment. As far as the implications for the EU are concerned, obviously there will be some implications there. We will deal with it when and if that legislation passes the parliament. If it means suspending the EU membership process, well, that will be the case, and we will have to deal with it at that point.
Now, looking at the public sentiment, do you think Turkey should perhaps be calling a referendum on the EU membership?
This has been debated, as you know, as recently as a few months ago, because as the membership process prolongs, people in the EU talk about enlargement fatigue, but there is also a membership fatigue here. That is that, you try everything, you change your legislation, and you meet all the criteria, you do one thing after another, like most recently, Turkey-EU migration deal or refugee deal, which helped Europe, more than anything else, dealing with the refugee crisis. We are still seeing some additional conditions. You have to do this, you have to do that, and it's presented as if they're doing a favor to Turkey. To the contrary, Turkey has done a great favor in taking care of the refugees. More than 3 million refugees. They are still in our country. We're still feeding them, looking after them, and we stopped the flow of refugees to Europe. Back in October, there were about 6,000-7,000 people every single day trying to cross to Europe. Now that number has come down to almost to zero. So the Turkey-EU refugee deal has worked, and so that should be celebrated. But instead of giving Turkish citizens the Schengen visa or visa liberalization, EU has put some other conditions or requirements in regards to the anti-terrorism law, saying that our anti-terrorism laws are too general and they need to be specified more, etc. But we are the ones who can only decide on the extent of that law, because first of all, our anti-terrorism laws were formulated in line with the EU criteria and the other anti-terrorism laws. Secondly, now especially after this coup attempt, it's clear that in fact we needed this law. But at the same time, we've been fighting against ISIS terrorism and the PKK terrorism unabated. And while the world has talked about the anti-ISIS coalition of which we are a part and the fight which we support, we have no problem with that, but the world has not paid enough attention to the PKK terrorist threat, which claimed the lives of hundreds of people over the last year or so. So we have to take measures against this. Now we have the Gulenist terrorist threat, obviously. So there will not be any changes in our anti-terrorism laws, that's for sure.
Right.
And of course we expect the EU and the rest of the world to understand why these laws are needed to fight against these security threats.
Okay, you've obviously spoken about some of the measures Turkey will be taking now, but just to sum up, what sort of measures would you be taking to make sure that such incidents are prevented in the future? Also, Turkey has been recently diversifying its foreign policy. There's been rapprochement with Russia, and also Turkey is trying to go for rapprochement with other countries as well. Do you feel that Turkey's relations with Europe or the United States may be suffering as a result of that?
No, I mean, there might be some specific cases, and we will deal with them, obviously, as specific cases. I will not make any generalization. You're right. I think we have really made very good progress in normalizing relations with Russia as well as with Israel. And this has been our policy from the very beginning because of what happened in Mavi Marmara in 2010 and because of the Russian fighter plane. We had these issues, but now we have resolved them. They're behind us. Now we look forward to improving relations with these two countries as well as with others. We don't have any problem with that. But at the same time, obviously, the security threats in the region are not going anywhere as long as the war in Syria continues and the security problems in Iraq continue. Obviously, we will be affected, as we have been affected by this. But it's not only Turkey that is being affected by this. Everybody, from Europe to all the Arab countries, from Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and all the other countries. So that requires a regional and global perspective to deal with these issues. And of course, we would like to work with our allies and neighbors to deal with the security issues. But we have to give priority to our own national security as well as Turkey is battling, with several terrorist threats at the same time. So it's only natural for us to expect understanding, cooperation, and solidarity from our neighbors and allies.
If I was to say you have 30 seconds to pass on a message to the international community and the people of Turkey, what would that be?
Well, the Turkish people has shown remarkable bravery and dignity in expelling this coup. And we are grateful that the world has stood with us for democracy against these coup plotters. And I hope they will continue to stay with us in our struggle to further strengthen democracy, rule of law, and freedom in this country.
Ibrahim Gulen, thank you very much indeed for talking to TRT World.